Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Have you been chasing symptoms around? Being prescribed a pill for this and a pill for that without solving the problems? What if all the seemingly unrelated symptoms you've been experiencing are rooted in the same thing, your hormones? This episode, the third in a series of 3, delves into the critical issue of hormonal imbalances found in both men and women and are often misdiagnosed for something else. If you missed the first episodes in this series, you can always find them in our archives at www.missionevolution.org. Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the Voice of Canada Broadcast Network, vocbn.ca. Dr. Deb Matthew is joining us once again to address the hidden hormonal issues often misdiagnosed as something else. America's happy hormone doctor, Dr. Deb is the best-selling author of Why Can't I Keep Up Anymore? A guide to regaining energy, focus, and peak physical and sexual performance for men over 40. And This Is Not Normal, a busy woman's guide to hormone imbalances. Dr. Deb is an international speaker, educator, wife, and mom of 4 boys. She's been featured on national podcast, radio, and over 100 TV appearances on NBC, ABC, CBS, PBS, and FOX. Her medical practice, Signature Wellness, is located in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her website, signaturewellness.org. Dr. Deb, thanks for joining us once again on Mission Evolution.
It's great to be here.
Well, this has been a wonderful, wonderful series, and I'm topping it off and finishing it out with how many things are mistaken for hormonal, that are actually based in our hormones. It's probably pretty staggering at this point.
Yeah.
So as a medical doctor, you became focused on hormones. What drove that decision?
I was having my own hormone issues. When I was in my late 30s, I became anxious and I was having panic attacks in the middle of the night for no apparent reason. Like there was nothing going on that warranted me to be nervous and anxious. And I became really irritable. I was losing it with my kids and shrieking at them over every little thing, even little things like they left their shoes at the front door and I would fly off the handle. And then I felt so guilty because that's not the kind of mom that I wanted to be. But I didn't understand what was happening to me because nothing in my medical training really helped to explain what was going on. And I knew that I didn't understand why I would feel anxious. I didn't feel depressed. But what I didn't understand is that it was my hormones. And when I figured it out and I got my hormones back in balance, I got back to feeling like myself again. And it really made all the difference. And so that's what prompted me to learn more about hormones, hormone imbalances. And so I've been doing this now this is my 18th year.
Wow. I didn't realize you've been doing it that long. So, a lot of people mistake every time we talk about hormones, they think of women and menopause and, that's it. But I guess there's a lot more different kinds of hormones and they all have to balance out somehow. So what exactly are hormones and what do we mistake them for?
Yeah. Well, hormones are chemical messengers. So they are made in different glands in our body, in different parts of our body, but then they go through our bloodstream and they actually give information to our body to tell our body what to do in all the different parts of our body. And so if we need, one hormone will go up if our heart needs to go up faster, speed up faster, and a different hormone can be released if our heart rate needs to go a little bit slower. So there's all sorts of most parts of our body, to be honest, are controlled by various hormones. And it's the balance between the hormones that makes a difference between is everything running smoothly or are we having symptoms and not feeling like ourselves? And in medicine, we were really taught to treat diseases, infections and things like that. But if your hormones are just a little bit out of kilter, then you don't feel as good as you could, and things can start to have little hiccups in your body. Um, but sometimes our prescription medicines aren't the right solution. It's just that that's mainly what we were taught to use at medical school. It doesn't always help if it's a hormone problem.
Sounds like hormones are command central of the body.
It's
How
a
much
great
of
way to put it.
how much of hormonal function and dysfunction is covered in medical school?
Well, we learn a lot about diseases of hormones. So if you have a disease where you're no longer able to produce a certain hormone, that would make you extremely ill. Or if you have a tumor and way too much of a certain hormone is being created, that causes really big problems. Those kinds of things we definitely learn about, and endocrinologists are the specialists that deal with those kinds of hormone diseases. What I think we're going to talk about today, though, is more when the hormones are somewhere within the realm of what would be considered normal, but they're not properly balanced, or they're not an optimal amount, so that we're not exactly sick, but yet we don't really feel well. And that's where it's so common. So many people have these kinds of symptoms. They have no idea that it's due to their hormones. And often their doctor also isn't aware that this could be because of their hormones. And so either they get misdiagnosed, or they get treated with a medicine to try to help their symptoms. And maybe the medicine even helps a little bit, but it's not really fixing the root of the problem, which is the hormones.
So you said that the hormones have to be in balance, and there's even hormones that keep your heart running at the right rate. Who controls all that? Where's that controlled?
Really great question. So some of it is controlled by our brain. In our brain, we have our hypothalamus, which is a part of our brain that's sort of like the true command center. And it sends messages to another part of our brain called the pituitary gland, which then sends messages out to different parts of our body. And then through our bloodstream, the hormones come back, and our brain can sense if the right amount of hormone is in the bloodstream and can start turning these messages off. So there's this feedback mechanism. Your brain tells your body to make more of these hormones, and then your brain can sense, okay, now I feel the hormones are back. And so it turns off the message. And that's a really important fine-tuned, messaging system that doesn't always work so great. So if we're not eating the right foods, if we're too stressed out, if we're not getting enough sleep, toxins in the environment, there are all kinds of examples in our modern world where this fine-tuned messaging system has some hiccups in it. And then the end result is we're tired, we don't sleep, we feel bloated, we can't lose weight. We have all these different symptoms. And when we show up to our doctor to complain, what we were trained to do in medical school is to make sure that you're not sick, to make sure that you don't have a disease. And because this doesn't really count as a disease, we don't really have a medicine to fix it. And so you end up sort of falling through the cracks of our medical system.
So I take it that somehow the body has to talk to the command central to let it know that something's awry before it's prompted to make the correction.
Yeah, there's all kinds of signaling pathways in our body, and it's all very complicated. Um, but our body is so amazing, and so mysterious, and so it's it's so amazing how all of this stuff works together. And so it's not surprising that sometimes it doesn't work as smoothly as it needs to. But we can tell typically by lab tests and things like that whether somebody's hormones are not doing what they need to do. Sometimes we can tell just from the pattern of symptoms that they're having. The most important thing is we have to know to ask the questions. And so sometimes just starting with, could this be my hormones, is a really great question to ask, so that at least that can be taken into account as a possible reason for why you're not feeling your best.
But if you go into your normal practitioner, who is so busy, by the way, they don't have time to sit around and talk to you very long. If you know the right questions to ask still, so they run a hormone panel, does it always show up there?
So it's a good question. So first of all, when you go in to talk to your regular doctor, sometimes it's difficult to get them to run a hormone panel because it's not really part of what we were trained to do unless we're looking for a disease. And unless they think that you could have a disease that has to do with your hormones, then they probably are less likely to run the lab tests for you. And then more often than not, the lab tests may come back showing that your hormones are in the quote unquote normal range, which means, normal means you don't have a tumor or you don't have a disease. It doesn't mean that you're feeling your best. And it doesn't mean that you wouldn't feel better if we got your hormones in a little bit better balance. And so sometimes it can be really difficult because this is a different way of thinking about things than what we were trained in medical school. In medical school, really honestly, we were trained to treat diseases with medicines or surgeries. So it's important for your doctor to check you and make sure that you don't have a serious disease. But if you're still not feeling good, sometimes what you end up being told is it's just stress, or this is just normal, or this is just your age, or, it's really not so bad. You should just put up with it. And these are all really unsatisfactory answers when you don't feel good.
I was going to say, tell my husband that, right?
Yeah.
Just put up with it, not. So the if the range of the labs, it's pretty gross, right? It's
Quite a big range most of
quite
the
a big
time.
range. If you move it in, because now we get to see our labs very often. You go to a patient portal or this or that.
Yeah.
So if you manage to get your doctor to run the panel in the first place, where would you start to look, even though they're not trained to do so? Where would you start to look on those ranges? How far in would you cut them?
Yeah. Well, you know what? It varies for each hormone. And so I think it's very difficult for people to try to interpret their own labs and try to figure it out for themselves because it's complicated and there are lots of different hormones. So it's not like when we say a hormone panel, there's lots of different hormones that can be measured. And so which ones would even be the right ones for you based on your circumstances, your history? So it's as a general statement, if your hormone level is kind of at the low end of normal or kind of at the high end of normal, theoretically, either way, you could have hormone symptoms and maybe you would feel better if it was in the middle, but we can't sort of make a blanket statement because that might not be true for every hormone or for every person. We are all very unique and we all have a very unique pattern of hormones. Some people even talk about it like our hormones are like an orchestra. And if they're going to be playing a symphony, we need all of our different instruments, all of our different hormones to be playing in tune in order to create this beautiful symphony. And if you've got, the tuba is out of whack where, all the other instruments are doing a great job, it's not going to sound right. And it doesn't mean that the orchestra is broken. It just means, we need to tune in that tuba and get the tuba back, back into the symphony so that it can sound like it should.
It sounds extremely complex because everybody is different, and then all this different interaction between hormones. You can't just see it on a piece of paper, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why even doctors struggle with it. It's not so simple. And sometimes I think that patients think or maybe hope that it's a little bit like paint by numbers. Just get your hormones tested.
Not
And then
even.
as long as they're in the range, then we know exactly what to do. But there's more nuance to it than that, which is why it's hard for doctors too.
Well, it's time for us to take a station break. Dr. Deb and I will return very shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. What do hormones do? The answer may surprise you. With us this hour discussing misdiagnosed symptoms that are often hormonally related is Dr. Deb Matthew. Dr. Deb is the author of This Is Not Normal, A Busy Woman's Guide to Hormonal Imbalances, and Why Can't I Keep Up Anymore? A guide to regaining energy, focus, and peak physical and sexual performance for men over 40. Dr. Deb, we were talking about the complex interaction between hormones. Are they really even understood completely?
Well, I think we understand what hormones do. We know what their actions are. But where I think a lot of people are surprised is that a lot of symptoms that commonly, we experience can be due to hormone problems, and that's the part that's not really recognized. So even for doctors, doctors know generally what different hormones do, but don't always recognize when they're not doing everything that they need, and so people cannot feel good. So there are a lot of symptoms that people experience commonly, that could be because their hormones are out of balance, and it's often not recognized that hormones are a cause of those symptoms. So people go through all kinds of medical workups looking for underlying problems. Often it comes back, everything is normal, um, and solving the hormone problem could have fixed the symptoms.
That's the name of your book. This is not normal, right?
It's not normal.
Because you know inside that you're just not who you used to be, I'll bet. And it's amazing to me how much emotional involvement is regulated by hormones. We think our emotions are what we manage and how we feel at any given time, but how much effect does hormones have on our emotional well-being?
Yeah. Anybody that's ever had PMS, I think, can attest to the fact that our hormones have a lot to do with how we feel emotionally. And there are all different ways that this can manifest depending for women or for men and for what ages. But hormones play a really big role in who we are on the inside, how we relate to other people, how we react to the world around us. So PMS is just one example. Our hormones go up and down over the menstrual cycle. And when they're changing right before our period, often, right, women feel more emotional or irritable or cry more easily or they're more tired. All kinds of emotional changes happen. And it's that change in hormones, due to our menstrual cycle. And then as we get into our late 30s and into our 40s, we enter this time of our life that's called perimenopause. And as our hormones are shifting, as we're kind of tippy-toeing our way towards menopause, progesterone levels drop. That's the first hormone that drops for women. And progesterone is the calming hormone. And so when progesterone levels drop when we're in our late 30s and in our 40s, women can start to feel more anxious. And this was my problem. I was feeling anxious. I was having panic attacks in the middle of the night for no apparent reason. Because it's a calming hormone, when you don't have enough of it, now you become more irritable. And instead of just being irritable like 2 days before your period starts, now we can be, irritable for a week or even 2 whole weeks out of the month. And women often don't recognize that this new anxiety or this new irritability is because of their hormones. Especially if you're 38 or 42, you're not thinking about menopause. But this is a really common one. Another really common hormone that affects how we feel and our emotions is testosterone. And this is true for women and for men. Testosterone is a hormone that gives us confidence, self-esteem, drive, motivation, get up and go, get things done, be efficient. And so if testosterone levels start to go down, which they can for women in our 40s, they can for men, as men get older as well, when testosterone levels go down, people describe themselves just like feeling a little more flat, just kind of blah. Like you go through the motions, you put one foot in front of the other and you make your way through your day. And whatever has to get done today, you'll make it happen. If you need to get the food on the table for dinner, or if you've got that report you have to hand in at work or whatever it is, like you can make it happen, but you kind of have to push yourself a little bit. And then anything that doesn't really have to happen today, maybe like working out or, maybe a hobby that you used to enjoy, you sort of sometimes just procrastinate and because you're just not really feeling it. That's another really common thing. But if you went into your doctor to say, I just don't really feel like doing things that I used to do. I don't really have a lot of, motivation. I just kind of want to sit around a lot. That's just got depression written all over it, right? And so the tools that we are taught in medical school, if you're describing yourself that way, is to give you an antidepressant. But then the antidepressant has side effects sometimes. It can make you gain weight and lower libido, and those things are depressing. And so it's not fixing the right problem. And so, often the results can be unsatisfactory.
So do you end up kind of chasing at this point? So you go in and you're diagnosed with depression, you're given antidepressants, which probably make your physical symptoms worse. It doesn't correct the hormonal issue, right?
In some cases, it does. And, I think this is common for women, but women are learning more and more that perimenopause and hormones can affect them. But for men, especially, for men, their hormones go down kind of just very gradually over time. It just kind of creeps up, so there's nothing dramatic or sudden. They don't have periods that stop or change to warn them that there's a hormone change going on. So a lot of men that I talk to will say, I think it's just my age. Like, I'm not 18 anymore, but it's not typically just your age. And if you're feeling tired and you're just not really motivated and you kind of lost that competitive drive, and, maybe you used to go out and, work out at the gym or play golf or, whatever you really enjoy. And now you just kind of want to sit at home on the couch and, not really do so much. It really could be a low testosterone problem. But first of all, men, don't love necessarily going in to talk to their doctor. Like, it has to get kind of bad for a lot of men before they're willing to go. But again, if you walk in the door and say, like, I'm just kind of tired and I don't really feel like doing things, that sounds like depression. And low testosterone also for men can result in anxiety. Like, it's harder to make decisions. You second guess yourself. You start to worry about things you didn't used to worry about. So now you could get the diagnosis of anxiety. Now you could get an anxiety pill, or maybe you don't sleep as well at night. So the anxiety pill and the antidepressant aren't really going to work well if the real problem is low testosterone.
So here's a new one on me. Midlife ADHD. What is it? And how is it normally tested? And how is it hormone related?
Okay. For the typical person who has ADHD, this is something that, looking backwards, even if they weren't diagnosed as a child, when they look back, they can recall when they were in second grade, they were easily distractible and it was hard for them to get their work done. And so generally for people who have ADHD, this is something that they've had their whole life, even if they don't get diagnosed until they're an adult. So not being diagnosed until you're an adult, but having it your whole life, that's one thing. But a lot of women, or men, to be honest, but who didn't used to be that way, all of a sudden now are noticing that they're having a really hard time focusing, and they have to write every little thing down because they can't remember. And they're expending so much energy just trying to keep track of things where they used to not have any difficulty. And they feel like they have ADHD, like they just feel like their focus and attention is so problematic in a way that it never used to be before. And a lot of times this can be a hormonal issue. And when we help get hormones back in balance, whether it's low testosterone in men or whether it's perimenopause or menopause in women, this is a really common symptom that we see. And getting the hormones replaced or getting them back in balance can actually get your brain to go back online so that you can think straight again, and you can have better focus again.
So are these symptoms like short-term memory stuff? I mean, like you're in one room. I love this one, and you know what you're doing. You walk through that door, and you're in a whole new world. What was I walking into this room for? But if you go back to the room you were in, very often something will trigger you. Oh yeah, I was going to go get the. Is that what you're talking about?
So that is one of the common things that people can complain about. Another really common one is word finding. Like, you know what you want to say. It's right there on the tip of your tongue, but you just can't find it. And you start to like go around about in the conversation, and you use words like, the thingamajig, or the whatchamacallit, or the names, like, the name of somebody that you've known this person for 10 years. Like, of course, you know their name, but here you are, you're at an event and somebody walks up and you need to introduce these two people, and you just draw a total mind blank and you can't think of this person's name. So these are some of the things that people complain about. So it can be focus, it can be short-term memory, it can be just like staying on task, like reading something and remembering the paragraph versus having to read it like 3 times before it sinks into your brain. And
So these symptoms, scarily enough, It's like you're talking about dementia or Alzheimer's. When people start having these, that's the first thing that's going to come to mind, isn't it? Is it the first thing that comes to the doctor's mind?
That's a great question. So absolutely, this is the first thing that comes to mind. And when somebody complains that they're having some memory problems, the first thing that I think about, well, first of all, we need to think about their age, right? So if they are, 45 to 55, we sort of know that they're in that perimenopausal, menopausal age range. This is such a common symptom when our hormones are changing. And so that would really be the first thing that I think about, is that this is changes that are having to do with menopause. Um, what would make me think that it's something more than menopause would be if this has been long standing, like over years, if it's getting worse, and then if more serious kinds of memory lapses are happening, like you're driving home and suddenly you sort of things look unfamiliar and you kind of for a moment can't really remember where you are and what's the next turn to get home. So if those kinds of more significant memory blips are happening, that's when I would be more worried about it. And I would, want to have more of an evaluation to see what's going on. These smaller things where, you just have to write everything down and you've got a list for your lists and, that is much more likely to be hormonal.
What about women that have had a hysterectomy and they've taken everything? So all of a sudden you go from being where you were to what a modern mess I'll bet that makes.
You're right. So especially if we take your ovaries out, like you said, everything is gone, you become menopausal overnight. So if you weren't menopausal yet, but you had to have all your, uterus and ovaries removed, then we've just put you into menopause, like bam, just like that. And that can be very difficult for women. So you can have the hot flashes and things that a lot of women associate with menopause, but I don't believe that a lot of people recognize just how important estrogen is to our brain. Energy, sleep, mood, memory, all of these things are affected by estrogen. So a lot of women will say, I just don't feel like myself. Like, this isn't me. I just want to feel like myself again. And it can be very difficult to put it into words, like you're trying to describe what do you mean by that? And it's very difficult. But it can be very dramatic for women who have their, their hysterectomy and have their ovaries removed.
So it's time for another station break. Dr. Deb and I will be right back to continue our discussion. So you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Are your symptoms piling up with no answer in sight? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing hormonal imbalances is Dr. Deb Matthew. Her website is signaturewellness.org. Dr. Deb, I mean, you can come to a doctor and you've got all these seemingly unrelated symptoms. Can you kind of give us a picture of how many seemingly or which seemingly unrelated symptoms would point you, but not necessarily somebody that hasn't studied it, towards hormones?
Yeah. To this, we are looking for patterns in the symptoms. And I would say that the first thing that we think about is how old is somebody, because of course our hormones change depending on where we are in our life. So if it's a young woman and we're thinking about hormones, we're going to look for things like, does it vary with their menstrual cycle? Does it get worse before their period? And does it get better after their period, for example? And then if a woman is over 35 and especially into her 40s, we're going to be thinking about perimenopause. And so some of the really common symptoms that we see, other than menstrual changes, which are very common, so heavier periods, more PMS, periods can come more frequently. So those kinds of things, I think women would clue in that probably there's a hormone issue, right? If their periods are changing. But also we look for anxiety and irritability, just feeling more impatient, critical, negative, just not as tolerant, and sometimes less in control of their emotions. So sometimes, we let things fly when we really probably should have zipped our lips. So I had one patient tell me that when she is in that month, that time before her period, if she sees dust bunnies under her couch, it just drives her so crazy and she can't stand it. But after her period, she can see the same dust bunnies and she can sort of say, oh, well, I guess I need to get to that. So it can really affect how we react to things. But besides our mood, women can have heart palpitations. And so they end up in the emergency department getting the whole cardiovascular workup and the monitors and the CAT scans or the x-rays or the blood tests, like all the things, trying to understand why they're having these heart palpitations. And their heart workup comes back negative. So they're sort of left with no answer, but it's a really common symptom that we see in menopause. And so, of course, we have to rule out that it's not something more serious. We would never want to miss a heart problem. But heart palpitations are one of the common symptoms that we see with menopause that is often not recognized. So for women who are over 45 and, kind of getting into their 50s, this is when we also look for things like achy joints, dry skin, memory problems, vaginal dryness, urinary problems like urinary leakage or urinary tract infections. So depending on how old women are, we're kind of looking at these constellation of symptoms in order to help us judge, could this be due to hormones? And the same is true for men, depending on where they are in their lifespan too. The pattern of symptoms is a really important clue for us.
So likely a woman could have heart palpitations, mood swings, depression, irritability, um, incontinence, all these things, and they would be treated as individual problems versus put together and seeing that it's actually probably hormonal related.
Exactly. So she would have a heart doctor to think about her palpitations, and she would have her gynecologist thinking about her, urinary tract things or whatever. And if she's got achy joints, then she might go see a rheumatologist. Like we've got all these specialists, and each specialist is only looking at their one symptom. And generally, they're treating it with whatever, like the urinary tract infections get the antibiotics, and the heart palpitations get some kind of, heart medicine to prevent that. And the joint doctor gives you the anti-inflammatory pills. And so we get all these pills. Each symptom gets its own pill. And maybe some of those pills help to diminish the symptoms. I'm not against medications, but if we could just address the underlying root cause for why all of these symptoms were happening, then we could make the symptoms get better and we wouldn't need all of those prescription medicines, often that come with side effects.
And don't you end up being kind of like a toxic dump for all these chemicals? And
Yeah,
we don't know how do we know how they interact with each other?
no, of course, that's a really important point. We don't have studies that show what happens if you mix an anti-inflammatory pill with a sleeping pill, with a cholesterol pill, with an antidepressant. Like when we put all of that cocktail together, nobody really knows exactly, because we couldn't possibly study every single permutation of all the different possibilities. So, ideally, we want to be healthy and we want to feel good, and everybody deserves to feel good. But if we can help you to feel good without having to rely on prescription drugs, that would be desirable. That would be great.
So then say you're one of those people that's got all these bottles lined up and you're on all these prescription drugs, all of which were prescribed for something that was misdiagnosed. Once you're on all those prescription drugs, does that muddy the water and make it even more difficult to track down what's really going on?
I suppose it can. It doesn't make it impossible, though, because if we can evaluate somebody's hormone status, figure out what hormones might be too high, what hormones might be too low, get started bringing things back into balance, whether it's with lifestyle factors, nutritional supplements. Sometimes we use bioidentical hormones, which is the natural form of hormones if we need to replace something. Then they can feel better. and then their symptoms start to diminish and to kind of melt away. And then we can start working towards taking away maybe this medication first or lowering the dose of that medication. And then we can kind of work our way down off of some of those medications where appropriate. Sometimes there's medicines that have to stay depending on what they're for. But that's sort of the approach, is we don't just take the medicines away. We help you feel your best first, and then we kind of work on them one by one to sort of decide, do you really need them anymore? Maybe we could do without.
So this is a hot topic. Erectile dysfunction. Is it indicative of a hormone imbalance? And if it is the imbalance, is it correct? Is it correlated? So can it be corrected so that men can get away from the little
Yeah.
blue pill?
Yeah. The first thing that we should say about erectile dysfunction is it's important for men to know that if they are having difficulty with erections, that it is quite likely a sign of heart disease. Because in order to have an erection, blood has to flow in. And if the blood vessels are blocked, partly, then blood doesn't flow as well. But if you have some blockages in the blood flow leading to your penis, you may well have it everywhere, including blood vessels to your heart and to your brain. So that would be the first thing is, don't ignore it. It's a symptom that could be a sign of something different. But if testosterone levels are low, that can cause erectile dysfunction for men. And so you can take the little blue pill, and what that does is it opens up blood vessels so more blood can flow for a better erection. But it doesn't fix the underlying testosterone problem. But here's one of the ways that men can know, even without a blood test. There's a difference between desire and erections. So if the problem is that the desire is just not really there, like the libido has gone down and, they're just not even thinking about it, then that could be a testosterone problem, because testosterone impacts your brain. If the libido is there, if the desire is there, but the erection is just not functioning as well, then that's more likely to be a blood flow problem, and testosterone may not help that. But a clue that a man could have low testosterone is if he's having morning erections. So if a man wakes up consistently in the morning with a strong morning erection, probably testosterone levels are okay. On the other hand, if the morning erections have been lost and they're just not really happening very consistently, then that's an important sign of low testosterone.
So how dangerous is the if you add testosterone, and maybe it was some of a problem, but you've got a blockage problem that could lead to
Yeah.
heart attack. Is that going to make it worse? The testosterone, I know that's got a bad rap with heart.
Yeah. Well, testosterone is actually really, really important for men's heart health, and men with low testosterone have a risk for heart disease. So if you don't currently have heart disease, but you have low testosterone, if we can help you get your testosterone levels back up, either naturally or by giving you testosterone replacement therapy, that's actually important to protect your heart, your brain, your bones. Like, it helps to keep you healthier, and men live longer if they have better testosterone levels. Now, if you already have heart disease today, and that's partly why the erectile function is a problem, then we have to be a little bit more careful. So here's where you need to have a proper evaluation from your doctor, and we need to know what we're dealing with and talk about the risks and benefits and everything. So it's not an all or none. It's not like it's always dangerous. Testosterone can be actually really beneficial for your heart, but we have to take each person's personal history and their personal risks and benefits into account.
Is some of the hormone tendency towards hormonal imbalance hereditary?
Well, yes, but all of us are going to age. And so menopause happens to all of us. If you're lucky enough to live long enough, all women are going to go through menopause. And really, all men, have testosterone levels that decline over time. But the tendency to have more or less problems can be inherited. So some women, more kind of female problems run in the family. Some men have more of a tendency to have low testosterone that runs in the family. So there's not like there's a gene for this. It's not like there's one gene that controls this. But certainly there can be a tendency to have different things that run in the family. And that's especially true with thyroid. We haven't really talked much about thyroid today, but thyroid disease often can run in the family.
Ooh, well, let's jump on the thyroid. I mean, that I think is pretty much misunderstood, right? We have Hashimoto's disease, and then we just have low thyroid. What's the difference between those two, say, for instance?
Okay. Um, the most common cause for low thyroid is this Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition. So our immune system has made a mistake. Our immune system is supposed to make antibodies to go fight germs. But in this case, our immune system made a mistake, and now it's created antibodies that are fighting our own thyroid gland and damaging our own thyroid gland. This is very common. I have this. 90% of women with low thyroid have this as their reason. It's just that it's often not tested for, so they have no idea. But if this is the case, this is an autoimmune condition. That's what we call this class of diseases where our own antibodies are attacking a part of our own body. And that's important because your thyroid gland would have been fine if your immune system left it alone. So really, this is an immune system problem as opposed to really a thyroid problem. So if this is in its early stages, sometimes if we can do things to help your immune system calm down, we can actually save your thyroid and it can recover and it can get better without needing thyroid replacement medicine. Once you've had this for a long time and your thyroid's been damaged sort of beyond repair, then you're going to need to be on thyroid replacement therapy. And that's sort of a more permanent thing. Not everybody, though, who has low thyroid has it because of an autoimmune condition. There are other reasons that you could have this. So sometimes people have surgery, they have thyroid cancer or nodules or other reasons that they have to have their thyroid removed. That would obviously cause low thyroid. But toxins in the environment can do this. So fluoride, chlorine, halogens, there's different chemicals in the environment that can damage our thyroid gland, heavy metals, there's chemicals that,
Well, sorry to interrupt on the
you know,
thyroid, but it's time for another station break. Please stay with us as Dr. Deb and I continue to explore the hidden symptoms of hormonal imbalances. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Can hormonal issues be fixed? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Deb Matthew. Her website, signaturewellness.org. So we've been talking about a lot of ways that hormonal imbalances are misdiagnosed as something else. Once we get it figured out that we are dealing with a hormonal issue, what are our choices? How can we fix it?
Yeah. Well, this is how I approach it with my patients is we look at 4 pillars of health. So we're looking at the hormones, but we're also looking at gut health, we're looking at toxins, and we're looking at lifestyle habits. So if we go backwards, lifestyle habits is an important first place to start. So we want good nutrition. We need to fuel our body with the vitamins and minerals and all the nutrients that we need in order to be able to make hormones. We want to make sure that we're not overdoing sugar, alcohol, the kinds of things that are harmful, the fried foods, fast foods, junk foods. So healthy nutrition is a really important place to start, no matter your age, no matter which hormone is the problem for you. Exercise is another important tool for us to help balance hormones. So regular exercise, it doesn't have to be, hardcore marathons or anything like that, but regular moderate exercise is important. Getting enough sleep, because interestingly, a lot of these hormones that we're talking about are produced in our body at night while we're in a deep sleep. So if you're not getting a deep sleep, then you may not be making your hormones, whether it's because of sleep apnea or just, you're burning the candle at both ends and you're not going to bed in a timely manner. And then, of course, the hormone imbalances can make it so that you don't sleep well. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. But sleep is really, really important. And then stress is hugely important. No matter what the age, no matter what your hormone issue is, When you are stressed, your body reacts by making more cortisol, which is our stress hormone, and cortisol regulates all the other hormones. So if you're stressed and your body's busy making more cortisol, it can do so at the expense of the other hormones. So stress makes cortisol go up, which can actually cause other hormones to go out of whack. So balancing stress and bringing cortisol back down can make a big difference. So lifestyle habits are always a really, really important place to start.
W- one of the things that seems like big modern problem is the flora and fauna or lack thereof in our gut. If our gut is imbalanced in flora and fauna, can that be part of the equation?
Yeah, the kind of bacteria and microbes that live in our digestive tract turn out to be really, really important to our overall health. We need to have enough of the good bacteria, the probiotic bacteria, because that's what keeps us healthy. If we get too much of the wrong kind, then we may not. It's almost like a little infection in the lining of your gut. And if your gut is inflamed, then you may not properly digest and absorb those vitamins and nutrients from your food. Also, if your gut is inflamed, this can agitate your immune system. So now your immune system gets activated, makes more antibodies looking for where the germs are, and that increases the likelihood that it would make a little mistake. And now it's fighting your thyroid gland or causing another autoimmune condition. The good bacteria in your gut are also actually important for clearing hormones out of your system. So your body makes the hormones, you use them, and then your liver puts them into your gut. And then we eliminate them when we have a bowel movement. But the bacteria in our gut can sometimes reabsorb the hormones into our system and short circuit that. So healthy bacteria is really important for healthy hormones.
So we've talked a little bit about autoimmune and things like MS and Parkinson's. Are those autoimmune diseases also?
So MS is definitely an autoimmune disease. Parkinson's could be, but it tends to be from damage to a certain part in our brain. So it's not exactly the same thing, but lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, there's all kinds of different autoimmune conditions out there.
Well, the reason I'm asking is it sounds like hormones might be playing a part in this. I mean, it's such a complicated weave. We've got the gut flora, we've got the everything.
Yeah.
So then you don't absorb your vitamins, and then that becomes a problem, and going round and round and round and round.
Yeah.
But these autoimmune diseases don't. Do we tend to have more than one? And once we have one, and how likely are they to be hormonal related?
Yeah, so you're right. Once our immune system has made one small mistake, so now we have an autoimmune condition, it increases the likelihood that our immune system could make another mistake and we could have another one. And some people have 3 and 4 different autoimmune conditions all at the same time. And our hormones definitely play a role. Autoimmune conditions are much more common in women. There seems to be a tie to estrogen. So the hormones help to regulate our immune system. And estrogen sort of helps to upregulate or speed up our immune system just a little bit, which can increase the chances of autoimmunity. So there's a lot that's looked into. Back in the olden days, before we used to have a lot of the common medicines that we have today, prednisone and different things that we commonly use, we actually used to use estrogen to treat things like rheumatoid arthritis. So there is a tie, and not all autoimmune conditions are the same. So estrogen is more helpful for some and less helpful for others.
Is testosterone related in there?
Testosterone is very strongly anti-inflammatory. And so some of the things that I see is if I have a woman, for example, who has something like lupus or something where they have aches and pains like rheumatoid arthritis, if we give them, if they are menopausal and they're deficient in testosterone, and so we've decided that we're going to give them testosterone replacement therapy, that testosterone replacement, which is very anti-inflammatory, can often have a really big impact on their pains and inflammation and can make them actually feel quite a bit better in some cases.
So, what's the most common misdiagnosed and treatment that women that actually have hormonal imbalances are faced with?
Yeah. Well, one of the common ones that I see is low thyroid, which causes high cholesterol. So women can, have a normal cholesterol and they putter along, and then they go to the doctor to complain that they're tired and they can't lose weight and they're cold and they're constipated, all these symptoms of low thyroid. and the doctor runs some blood work and finds that their cholesterol is up. And so the treatment is usually a medication for their cholesterol, but low thyroid is a very common cause of high cholesterol. So obviously not everybody with high cholesterol has low thyroid, but if somebody comes back with high cholesterol when it didn't used to be high, I think that we should be checking their thyroid to make sure that it's not a thyroid problem. Because if it is a thyroid problem, then we should be able to treat their thyroid and their cholesterol would go back to normal. Menopause is another cause of elevated cholesterol because all these hormones that we're talking about, except for thyroid, but estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, even vitamin D, they are all made out of cholesterol. And so if we go through menopause or if a man's testosterone level goes down, then sometimes our body will make more cholesterol because it is the building block to make the hormones that we need. And if we get our hormones back in balance, maybe with hormone replacement therapy or by whatever means, then our cholesterol can just naturally go back down without needing to take this medication. If we don't make the right diagnosis, if all we do is we measure your cholesterol and it's up, then we give you the cholesterol pill and it makes it go down, when do we stop the cholesterol pill? Like you're on that cholesterol pill forever, really, right?
But aren't you stunting the very thing that the high cholesterol is supposed to be doing? In other words, making hormones, right?
Yeah, so you're shutting down cholesterol, and sometimes the cholesterol medicine can actually be a cause, especially of low testosterone in men, because especially if a man has heart disease, then sometimes the heart doctors want to turn that cholesterol down so low and they're given such a big dose of cholesterol medication to get it way, way down there. Now they don't even have enough cholesterol to make testosterone. And now they feel tired and they're not sleeping and they've got achy joints and they gain weight and they feel depressed. So then they get an antidepressant. Like it just, you can sort of see how the pattern goes. But in the very beginning, if it was recognized, oh, it's a low testosterone, let's do something to get the testosterone better. Now the cholesterol will get better. And plus the man will feel better. He's way more likely to eat his vegetables and go exercise and be able to maintain his weight and do all the other things that would make him healthy and not feel depressed.
So does our age affects our hormones.
Yeah.
Um, so what's the thought behind, okay, we're getting old and getting old is natural, but our hormones are going down and we'd really like to feel better. Where do you stand on replacing hormones that are just kind of going away because of age?
Yeah. So I think hormone replacement therapy is always optional. So it's always a person's choice. I believe that everybody deserves to have a conversation with their doctor about the pros and cons for them personally, right? Because we all have different histories and circumstances and risks and benefits. So this needs to be a personalized decision. Way back in the day, we didn't live much past menopause. This was kind of the beginning of the end for us. So hormone therapy wouldn't have, been a thing. But nowadays, I think it's kind of like when you get over 40 and now all of a sudden, you have to hold the paper a little farther away because you can't quite read it anymore. That's natural, right? It's natural for our eyes to change, but we don't say, well, this is just a natural part of aging. You're just not going to be able to read anymore. What we say is, well, yes, this is a natural part of aging, but here's your reading glasses so that you can still be a productive member of society. So I feel like replacing hormones for somebody who chooses to do so can really have a dramatic difference in how they feel today and in how they age in a healthy way. But it's a personal decision that everybody, should make for themselves.
So if a person's going to go into their doctor and they're pretty well convinced that they've got a hormone thing going on, what's the nicest thing to say to them to get it tested instead of this is not required and your insurance company won't cover it as a response?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is just to go in and ask, do you think this could be my hormones? Could this be menopause? Could this be low testosterone? Could this be my thyroid? Just ask lots of questions. And what you're looking for is for your doctor to have a conversation with you to explain why they think it is or is not and what could be done. If you do get kind of we don't do that, you're too young to have a hormone problem, you're too old for hormones, if you kind of get shut down, don't just give up. If your doctor doesn't really have a solution for you, just understand it's not how they were trained. It's not part of what we normally do, but it doesn't mean that you can't go find somebody else who can look after you. Sometimes the testing may not be covered by your insurance, or the practitioner that you find may not be covered by your insurance, but it doesn't mean that you can't find the help that you need. And really, what I would recommend looking for is a functional medicine provider, because that's the kind of person that looks deep down to find the root cause of why you're feeling the way that you are.
Well, Dr. Deb, we are out of time. I can't thank you enough for this series. It's been so powerful. And just before we go, real quick, one word that would help people.
Be empowered.
Perfect. Perfect. Again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Our guest this hour has been Dr. Deb Matthew, America's Happy Hormones Doctor. Dr. Deb is a best-selling author of This Is Not Normal, A Busy Woman's Guide to Hormone Imbalances, and Why Can't I Keep Up Anymore? A guide to regaining energy, focus, and peak physical and sexual performance for men over 40. To find out more about Dr. Deb, where you can find her books and all she has to offer, visit her website, signaturewellness.org. And if you missed the other part of this series, you can also always find this one and the first three in the series on our website, missionevolution.org. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, like I said, visit www.missionevolution.org. Please be sure to join us again right here on the Voice of Canada Broadcast Network, vocbn.ca, where this mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and leading edge support to our rapidly evolving world.